we tend to have this mindset around, well, first of all, let's just be honest, like grief is a hard thing to touch, right? Like no one's like, hey, let's like sit together and be sad. Or like, let's talk about our grief. It's usually something that we've learned to avoid, learned to minimize as much as possible, but it's something that is so deeply universal to all of us as humans. Doesn't matter what race, culture, where you grew up, like grief is something we all experience, but not something we all have space to feel. And so for me, I feel like growing up in the US, it was always this feeling of, you know, whenever something bad would happen, or when bad things even maybe happen to us collectively, it almost feels like there's like this unspoken amount of time that you're allowed to be sad or like have feelings about it, right? Before people are kind of like, are you done? Like, have you moved on? And no one will say that to you, right? No one's going to be like, oh, are you still sad? I mean, maybe some people do, but it's kind of this like unspoken energy of, okay, you've had enough time, or like, this is the time you have to be sad about it. And these are the ways that you're allowed to do it. And then, especially when big traumas happen in our communities, it's like the news cycle already moves on to the next story, right? People often grieve in private, so you also don't know how other people are experiencing their own grief. They bury it in their work. I know I used to do that all the time, as I just work through my sadness, or even structures and systems that we're a part of, right? Like at work, we only have so many hours allowed for grief, and only if it's like the loss of a close family member. I remember during COVID, when so many of us were going through tremendous loss of life, I had a coworker who unfortunately lost like 3 of her family members in a very short amount of time to COVID and to other reasons. And she literally had like 10 days that she could take off, and that was it. And then she was back at work, having to show up and perform and, you know, meet expectations and quotas. And the whole time, all I could think about was like, have you had enough time to grieve? And I think we internalize that. I think I've internalized that in the ways that I've seen people around me grieve, or when I've had to grieve over loss, feeling like when I share with people like, hey, I'm still sad, or hey, I'm still having a hard time weeks, months later when it hits, because grief is also not linear, right? There can sometimes be this energy of like, oh, this is still something that impacts you, versus an opportunity to connect and to come together and say, like, yes, your grief is important. Your grief has a place here. Like, what do you need as a part of your grief process? And giving people spaciousness to grieve as much as they need to and in the ways that they need to. And so I think, again, and so to have that shift from, are you done grieving, to have you grieved enough? It also doesn't mean like, sitting or wallowing in our grief, because I don't think anyone wants to stay in that place either. But I think when we have an openness and a spaciousness to acknowledge that that's real, and then to have people come together with us, to sit with us in that grief, to give us the space that we need, to help us know that we're not alone. It also turns grief into an opportunity, I think, for deep connection, both with ourselves and with other people who are often also impacted by loss. So I think for me, having that shift has been really powerful, because then grief doesn't feel like this big, scary thing when I feel like I have to do it by myself, or I'm on a timer, like I only got this much time left, and then I got to be okay because someone is going to expect me back at work or back, at my full self. But it's given me time to really sit with it. And I'm super grateful to have a partner too, where when I've brought up to him, like, hey, I'm still grieving, his response isn't like, why, but it's, what do you need? Mm-hmm. Or it's a hug, or it's just sitting with me. And in that, it makes me feel like this grief is okay, and allows me to actually move through it and then transform it into something beautiful as well.
I think really personally and logistically, I'm curious, when he asks you those questions, like, do you always have the words? Are you always able to identify like, oh, this is what I need?
I think my pause shows the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
And that sometimes, sometimes what I need is, most times what I need is just that space to be sad and for someone else to like know that. First of all, like, I'm an extrovert. I also have my moon in Aries. For folks who know or care what that means, it means when I feel my feelings, they come on hot and heavy and they're intense and I got to feel them all the way through. And so, and I think for so many of us, like when we are in that deep grief, like we just need, what we really need is to know that we're not alone and to have space to feel that. And so, yeah, I think, also being someone who is like deeply self-aware, which is both a gift and a burden sometimes. I do feel like there are times where I can tell him like, yeah, this is what I need in this moment. Or to say like, actually, I don't know what I need right now, but I just need to be sad. He'll just be like, great. Can I get you a boba? Like, what do you need?